Hello, and welcome to Planting Fresh Seeds, Resources, Opportunities, and Inspiration for Women Farmers and Ecopreneurs. My name is Lisa Kivirist, and I help direct the Rural Women's Project at Moses, which helps support beginning women farmers and women. So, transforming the world through one's passion for food, something I personally share here where we live on our farm in southwest Wisconsin in Serendipity Farm and Bed and Breakfast, where food's an integrated part of our daily livelihood and something that my husband John and I see as a fundamental influence in changing our life from going from that corporate cubicle job to where we are today on the farm. So a little bit of my story plugged in here as well. But what we're going to talk about today is basically four categories. First, as any farmer would first do, we're going to test our soil a little bit, see what's out there as far as trends of women farmers and women in food-based businesses, and how this is really fundamentally changing our economy and shifting perspectives on wealth. Then the second area, which is the most important from my perspective, is adding compost and those mentors and getting more into some of these stories and case studies of what other women are doing in the field, literally. And seeds, 10 fresh idea seeds of ways that these women are approaching businesses unusual, fundamentally changing our perspectives on both agriculture and really how we eat, what's on our plate. And lastly, wrapping up with a couple specific resources. Again, the handout listing online has a lot more detail for you. So, to kick things off, bottom line, women feed the world. If we look at things globally, rural women produce the majority of the world's food, but I start off with this statistic because it's one where unfortunately there still are a lot of social injustice and economic injustice issues. While women, particularly rural women, produce the majority of our world's food, globally we still own less than 1% of the land. And I start with that global perspective because it's something that, while we talk about this vibrant, sustainable agriculture movement amongst women here in the United States, we really have an obligation to look at this more broadly and see how we can play an increasing leadership role in issues of women in agriculture globally and what role we can play. Taking things back here to the States, we've seen this growth of women farming for a while actually now. If you look at the last decade from 1997 to So in addition to the growth of women farmers, we see women starting businesses. And if you look at things more broadly from a trend perspective in the United States, these add up total to 23 million micro enterprises. And these are the small businesses like us here on our farm, 5 or fewer employees. In our case, it's just my husband and I. But this group makes up 87% of all businesses. And I mention that because it's something you often don't hear about in the media, in the news of big corporations and what we're doing to help our economy. But it's this small micro business, the small entrepreneur, the farmer, that have always been the fundamental backbone of our economy and something we need to reprioritize, particularly to get us out of our current recession situation. So 75% of all these businesses have one person, and 40% and increasing. Women are significantly increasing businesses faster and in higher number. And what's fascinating about this is how a lot of these businesses increasingly are reflecting prioritizing women's values, and particularly those amongst us in the sustainability realm. We're not starting businesses just because we need a job and a paycheck, but because we want to do something to fundamentally improve and change our world. And sometimes those values may not seem that transformational at first glance, but are important to realize nonetheless. And I mentioned here Charlene Torchier, who she and her husband John Huffaker started Journey In up in northwest Wisconsin in the Maiden Rock area. And I met John and Charlene when they came to our farm and bed and breakfast, probably over 10 years ago now, when they were starting this vision. They had to start a green retreat center. And while they weren't farming, they wanted to incorporate local foods, and that food aspect was an important part of their enterprise. And they had big dreams and big visions. And of course, John and I, having just started out our farm, while we're all for big visions, we wanted to help them, I thought, be a little cautious, rein it in. Maybe you don't want to do everything at once. Maybe you won't find this perfect piece of land. And the other thing was, Charlene mentioned, they are not morning people. So, we love the bed and breakfast environment, she said, but we're not too good with breakfast, so we're going to do brunch. And here I was every morning, getting up early, making my muffins, and I said, okay, sure, you go. So we kept in touch. They're wonderful people. And long story short is they did exactly what they envisioned. It took a while, but they found the perfect piece of property, buttressing up against several hundred acres of DNR property, which is fabulous if you can find it, because it wouldn't be developed. It took them a while, and of course there were lots of building hurdles along the way, but they built basically what they were envisioning and opened up their B&B, and they serve brunch. So they market this, they tell guests when they call to book that we serve brunch. They put out some coffee and muffins for the early risers, and then folks go for a hike or whatever they feel like doing, sleep in, and everybody gathers at around 11 o'clock for a brunch. And Charlene gets away with serving things that I never could for my 8 o'clock breakfasts of salads and soups and other things people would expect more at brunch. But the story reminds us to create businesses around what we value. And even if some things might seem trite, like you're not a morning person, they're important, fundamental ways that you are you, and things we need to think about when we start our business startups. And don't ever let the bed and breakfast owner tell you need to serve breakfast at breakfast time. So in addition to more women growing food and starting businesses, women buy food, bottom line. And this is interesting because across 80% of all household spending, and so you see this growth of self-employment of women becoming ECOpreneurs, becoming business owners. So women are finding, again like myself, that self-employment offers a lot more options for us to be creative in what we do, to integrate our family and children, to make lifestyle choices that steward the planet, be it the paper we put in our printer to composting our scraps to whatever we may be doing, which leads to healthier lifestyles, again, through this control and independence. And there's lots of different routes women take to achieve this. Melinda Hamelgarn is a journalist. She's a writer, not a farmer, but passionate about connecting people with healthy food sources. And she, years ago now, was doing actually her background is as a registered dietitian, and she was doing a lot of science-based writing and nutritional writing and things. And she, as I hope we all have, had a good girlfriend that she could vent to when things got rough or frustrating. And at this point, she was venting to her girlfriend about how she never saw alternative perspectives in the media when it came to agriculture, when it came to food systems. It was all very corporate ag dominated, and she'd love to see other options for folks. And she was venting to her friend, and finally her friend, after Melinda got all riled up, said, well, go out and do it. And Melinda said, I will. And so she did. And she started a specific freelance career where she branded herself as the food sleuth. So she does more investigative reporting and writes a syndicated column, and she has a radio show around these issues of trying to connect people to health through food and to help people decipher the science, the media side of things. She's playing a little detective, if you will, through being a sleuth to help people make better, healthy decisions. And another example of how opening up to self-employment opened up opportunities for Melinda is creativity, room to being creative and taking on projects that probably wouldn't have happened in another lifestyle realm. For example, her husband Dan is a talented amateur, as he calls it, but a very talented photographer, and he and Melinda have created for a couple of years now a calendar for their local farmers market in Columbia, Missouri as a fundraiser, where Dan captures photos of the farmers vending for market across the season, and often they've had this hand theme. So he's taken photos of the farmers' hands in different aspects of the food production process, and then Melinda adds her talent with words, and that becomes a beautiful calendar that they then, through their donated time, use as a fundraiser for the market. But I share that example because those kind of things probably wouldn't have come up, Melinda be first to say, if she was confined in a regular job situation.